Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Squall Growth Podcast. I am so excited to have a very special guest here today, Dan Shapiro from Glowforge. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. It's a delight.
Dan, you are a legend in the crowdfunding space and in the consumer product space and in the edtech space. Maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial story.
You bet. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Glowforge, but this is, depending how you count, company number 4, give or take. And so, I love the startup thing. I love the early stage. And I also love the impact that you get to have on people. So getting to run Glowforge for now nearly a decade, all the way through to scaling with hundreds of thousands of customers and products that are in retail has been just a real joy.
That's amazing. So maybe you can tell us about, what is that story that how did you get into entrepreneurship in the beginning and kind of get your first company going?
Gosh, how far back to go? I'll start with the first real company, which was after I started my career at Microsoft. I went to a startup, somebody else's startup. We made the first Linux-based cell phones targeted at teenagers. So we're building hardware and software from scratch. I ran product for that company. Was acquired by AOL. Went and ran the games team at Real Networks. And then I got bitten by the bug. So I was reading, this is like 2005, and there was very little out there about how to start companies. But I was reading blogs from just a few folks who were writing about this. One of them, Brad Feld, I was following just voraciously. I was so excited for every new post that he put up. But he was one of the few people who was sort of showing what went on behind the curtains of starting a company. And so I co-founded a company called Ontella, which later became PhotoBucket. Did mobile camera cloud services. This is in the pre-iPhone era, getting pictures and files from your phone to your PC into the cloud. Raised a bunch of venture money over the course of about 4 years, and then ultimately left the company, which continued to operate, still operates today. It's kind of been puttering along ever since, and founded a new company called SparkBuy, which was comparison shopping for consumer electronics. This was really just born of I want to buy something, and it turned out I couldn't find any of the data. So on the front end, what everybody saw was a lovely UI that helped you find exactly the thing you were looking for. So if you're looking for a TV, you could say, I'm going to connect it to my this device, and I want this size, and I want this technology, and it would take plain language queries like that and tell you exactly what products met it, not by search, but by actually filtering through all the data. Then on the back end, there was a team of people in emerging markets who were doing manual research to prepare the data. So it was this double-sided sort of thing. That company lasted for exactly 6 months, almost to the day, before Google acquired it,
Wow.
Which was triggered by a random conversation I had with a dude on an airplane where I was telling him about the company I was thinking about starting, and he said, call me if you do that. And then I didn't. And then he saw an article in TechCrunch and called me and was like, you did it. We got to go have coffee, which led to Google acquiring the company. Just a series of ridiculous coincidences.
I love that, though, because I've talked to some other leaders as well before on the show is about that playing field of luck in startups, right?
The CEO is the chief serendipity officer. It is luck, but it is the kind of luck that you work for. I will tell you, I had a rule for myself, which was I hate talking to people on planes. But if I got bumped into first class, or if I was flying to and from the valley, I would force myself to have a conversation with whoever sat next to me. And on that particular flight, I got bumped into first class on the way to the valley. And so I struck up a conversation with this guy who turned out to be the person who acquired the company.
You just did a commercial for upgrading to first class.
No, that was a free upgrade. I would never... I'm the one who flies coach internationally if I'm paying for it, but yeah, it was the way that came together was remarkable. And as a side note, selling your startup is wild because most people are only ever going to do it once, and you're doing it to somebody who does this all day long, a team of people who does it all day long. And nobody writes about it. Nobody talks about what really happens and the negotiations and challenges. And anyway, very interesting process. So sold the company to Google, spent a couple of years there. and I was helping a friend of mine pitch a TV show to Bruckheimer Pictures. And the pitch involved crowdfunding, which was fairly new. Like this was during the absolute, ascendancy of Kickstarter.
Okay.
And so I decided I wanted to learn a little bit about it. So the first thing I did was I backed 50 projects on Kickstarter, most of them for $1. And a couple that I really wanted, and then a lot, I just gave them $1. So I basically paid them $1 to be on their mailing list and tracked that over a while. And I was fascinated by the form, like the pitch, the video, the what turned out to be the pinnacle of the Kickstarter experience, the "I'm sorry, our product is going to be late" letter. Got a lot of those. Like you get one pitch per product, but you tend to get 3 or 4 "I'm sorry, it's going to be late" letters per product. So like I really got to see that in its full glory. And I had been playing around with this idea with my kids. I've never been any good at coding, never been a professional developer, but always like had that in my sort of like rusty toolkit. And I was thinking like, I don't really know any current programming languages. And when I went and looked at programming languages, they're all kind of written for people already experts in them. And I was like, this is really annoying. At the same time, my twins, you kind of see in the background, were 4. And I was thinking, I want to play board games with them, but I would rather stick myself in the eye with a spoon than play Candyland. And somehow those ideas came together and turned into this thing I called Robot Turtles, which is a board game that teaches programming principles to kids as young as preschool, not even able to read yet. And we had so much fun with it. And I had a bunch of friends who were excited about it and wanted it. I was like, oh, this is a great chance for me to try out this new thing. I've done I've taken angel dollars. I've taken investment dollars. I've helped lots of startups who are trying to do this. I'm going to try crowdfunding something. So put together a crowdfunding campaign in the course of probably the whole campaign came together in about a month and put up on Kickstarter, and it went bananas. It wound up, at the time, it was the most backed board game in Kickstarter history. As a side note, that honor was then beaten tenfold by the same friend, Alon, who I told you about, who I was working on the TV show with, when he launched his game Exploding Kittens, which turned into now one of the largest board game companies in the world. So I had about 500,000, 40-fold. I think I had about 500,000 and he had about 20 million. So he helped me with the Robot Turtles and then I helped him with the kittens, and that was the way of these things. But it was this amazing and delightful experience where people were just passionate about the product and sharing word of mouth, and it benefited from something that a lot of the great crowdfunding campaigns do, which was it was a balance of people wanted the product to exist. And so they said, this isn't going to exist in the world, because in 2012, like now STEM games are a dime a dozen. In 2012, it was controversial to talk about kids having experiencing coding before they could read. It made people mad. They're like, they don't need more screen time. And I'm like, I know, that's why it's a box of cardboard. And like, but even then it's wrong. Like, you shouldn't be talking about programming. So it got people riled up, which is great. Like, it made people passionate. And there was this phrase that came to mind at some point when I was working on it, a board game that teaches programming principles to preschoolers. And I was like, that's it. Because 80% of the people who hear that will not care at all. And 20% of the people who hear about it are going to be really fired up and be like, I want that. And maybe 1 or 2% are going to be mad, which is even better. Like, it's going to get people engaged. And suddenly I have this one phrase, not even a sentence, that's my entire pitch for it. It's something I could say to people that they could repeat to others and that could catalyze excitement. So it was one part I wanted and one part I want it to exist. And that was the magic, that it was the balance of both of those things. There was a selfish interest. It wasn't a charity. I want it to exist, but I don't want it personally. And it wasn't just a drop the coin in the slot product. I want it for myself. It was both. And so that's where that excitement came from.
Well, I like what you did there as well. I want to unpack something critical, is that you made something that was remarkable, and sent that everyone had to remark on it, good and bad. And a lot of times people say, I want to create a remarkable product, a great product, right? But it's tough, because if it's remarkable, people will critique it. People are going to discuss it. People are going to trash it. It's something scary for a founder. And how do you kind of think about that when going to market and getting some negativity?
Yeah,
and
I
you
mean,
make a great board game, right?
it's the all news is good news
Mm,
um, thing. If people are talking about your product, that's terrific. Now, you want people saying good things, the people saying good things to outnumber the people saying bad things. You want a great product that lots of people love, but you want something that's going to engage folks.
yeah,
And you want to understand that that conversation is a powerful and natural force of its own. You want to be in the mix. So, you try to be there in the community and represent, because people are just nicer when there's a human around. Like, I don't know how many times during the launch of Robot Turtles and then later with Glowforge, I would descend into some cesspit of people just slinging mud about whatever it was. I'd be like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm sorry I made something you hate that's really upsetting to you." Like,
yeah,
and people would like immediately chill out and they'd be like, "Oh, well, I mean, okay, I'm upset about this thing," and then I would blow their minds by being like, "Yeah, I totally get that. Like,
yeah,
that makes perfect sense. I share those same values that you share, that you are reflecting. I have a different feeling about it. Like, I think that's okay, or I think this works, or it's I get it. It's not the thing that you want, but and I'm sorry, I didn't make the thing you wanted, but it's something that a lot of people want, and I just kind of like be there as a decent human or try my best to be that. And oh my gosh, so often that would just like let a lot of pressure out of the room. And you know what? Like sometimes they'd be right. I'd mess stuff up all the time. The product's late and people are furiously upset because they're late. And you know what my defense is? Like, I'm really sorry. I messed up. That's my defense. I'm so sorry. I will happily give you a refund. I will sadly give you a refund, not happily. I will like you're right. Like my failure is causing you strife, and I am sorry. This is something I learned from so many bad Kickstarter I'm late apology non-apology emails, where people would like lash out at their co-founders or their manufacturers. They talk about how it wasn't their fault. They'd be
yeah,
like, all hardware is late. You should not be mad. But I'm like, what are you doing? No, people make mistakes. Own your mistakes. Come in there and like be sincere about that. And don't like you don't have to grovel and you don't have to like, crawl through the muck, but you be a sincere human. Just be a decent person. Be like, I'm really sorry. I messed up in a way that's gonna hurt. And doing that also feeds a community. Showing up in a way that's like, I'm here and I'm engaged. Um, when in the Kickstarter forums, I answered every single post about Robot Turtles pretty much without exception. And I'm zooming ahead, but I remember we announced a delay in the product development. What had happened, although like we talked a little bit about this, but for reasons will become apparent, we couldn't go into the details. We discovered that our laser tube vendor was selling us a bill of goods, that the products that they had sent us at the beginning were cherry picked to be the highest quality, and then they started selling us direct. And so we had to qualify a new tube vendor. And
yeah.
I did not want to throw them like under the bus and call them out. I didn't want to name suppliers and all that. What wound up happening was I spent a full day, literally from when I woke up until I went to sleep, writing the email to say this product is going to be late. And then I climbed on a plane, hit send, climbed on a plane to China, and spent oh no, sorry. Hit send, had 24 hours pass, and loaded up my laptop with all the emails because there's no satellite internet at the time, uh, and spent the entire flight to China replying individually to every single person who emailed me.
Mm,
That
yeah,
sucked. That was not a fun flight.
yeah.
But that's what you do if it's a product that you care about, if it's a community that you care about, and if you want to engage with the people who you want to care about it with you.
Well, that's brand building, though, right? And that's true brand. Is it's there's a lot of times we're talking about, especially with marketing, is there's this confusion of brand is like a logo and some pretty colors. There's the book, right? And then you have a brand. That's not a brand. A brand is a story, and you have to build that in the beginning, one on one, right? An email out to a customer, they now have a story of their interaction with you know with Dan Shapiro, and that now becomes more of the brand. People have that with Apple still with their Steve Jobs stories that are told now again and again and again, and that has become part of the mystique, part of the brand, which is so cool to hear.
Yeah.
Um,
And, there are brands that I admire that don't do that. So I love my kitchen gadgets. Instant Pot didn't do that. Shark Ninja Enterprises doesn't do that. I love my Ninja Creamy, but I have no idea who the CEO of the company is.
It's
Actually, it's
a
not
great
true.
product, but it's also a bank. They went bankrupt too, right? So
Well, yeah, but oh my gosh, like every hardware company coming through the pandemic was a disaster.
we got smoked, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
everyone got
like
smoked.
great marketing can put you on the upslope, but everything else about your company can destroy it. Like
Yeah.
that, operations, logistics, and supply chain. In any case, as we were talking about the Ark, in the prototyping for robot turtles, while I was building the early versions, I discovered this backwater technology. It's called CNC laser cutting engraving, and I wound up with this industrial carbon dioxide cutting laser installed in my garage because I thought it was really awesome. And you asked about entrepreneurial journey. Maybe
Yeah.
my first company was in college, building and performing laser light shows, like selling laser shows on the early internet, and then taking our laser shows and project them on the wall of dorms for $50 a night, during college parties. And which turned into a DJ business, which like wound up paying for a lot of my college. So I had this like love of lasers early on, learned about this technology, and I realized it was magic. That this actually let people come up with an idea, sketch it, draw it, now type it and just describe it to an AI, and then at the push of a button, create a beautiful physical product minutes later. And I was so excited about what this could do. And I kept showing it to people and realized that I was running afoul of the biggest learning I had from my Robot Turtles experience. The Robot Turtles experience was all about this worked because I could explain it in a sentence. And I had no way to explain what a Glowforge is or does in anything less than like a 10-minute conversation and probably a demo. Right? Like until you've showed people like, oh yeah, I took a picture from the Library of Congress and I drag and dropped it onto a piece of leather and hit print and now I have a mouse pad. Or like I'm just literally showing you what happened after laying around. Wasn't prepared for demo. For Passover, I was like, I'm going to make a Seder plate. I'm going to describe the thing in AI and it's going to make the design. And then I'm going to engrave it on a piece of stone that I got for $10 off of from Michael's. I'm going to take a piece of leather and I'm going to drag and drop a file from the catalog in and create a wallet from scratch. And I've had this for like 6 years. And it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a better quality than what you could buy at a store. It's going to be like something handmade and meaningful. And you can knock it out in anywhere from, minutes to one of our customers just had one of his creations on the red carpet at the Met Gala. He created this unbelievable dress with his laser cutter that there's a whole bunch of articles. If you look up Met Gala butterfly dress, that you can see just what you can do with the means of creation in your own hands. So that I don't have a sentence. It does what? It's a laser. I don't want a laser. Like, what do I want to cut things for? No. It's a magic box that you put materials in and you can create things. And when you show your kids this, you're giving them a world in which they can push a button and create things. And then, expanding past sort of the early maker audience to the crafter audience, because there's 10 million people who have robotic cutting devices from Cricut, Brother, Silhouette in their homes already that do paper and like sort of sheet materials because they do greeting cards and because they do scrapbooking, and it uses the same files and technology, but it lets you work with plywood and acrylic and chocolate and engraved cookies and like you name it. Taking to those audiences to schools. We're now in thousands of schools across the country. That's been really the growth of time. But after almost 10 years, I still never found that sentence. The one thing where I can say, like, here is the thing that helps you understand what this is and why you need it.
Yeah, the big like front on like packaging at a retail store, right? It's like, okay, I want that. Well, and then, but I mean, despite having that challenge, right? I believe you're still the record holder on largest pre-sale campaign of all time.
I think that's true for a 30-day crowdfunding campaign. At the start of it all, I said, all right, let's go back to the crowdfunding approach because I actually really loved it. And I'll tell you the reason I did it. We wound up building our own site, WordPress plus a bunch of extensions, and everybody who hears that was like, oh, so you wouldn't have to pay Kickstarter. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I could have paid Kickstarter. I wish I could have just given an extra percent or two off the top and had them take care of everything, because it was such a pain in the neck to do it. That's not the reason we built it ourselves. The reason we built it ourselves is the same as the reason why we crowdfunded in the first place, because we wanted the community that comes of people coming together to make something exist. And when you build the site on Kickstarter, they own your community. Everybody goes there. Everybody mails you through Kickstarter. It is forever Kickstarter's community, and it's really hard to make it your own. And we wanted that to be our own from the start.
That's a bit. I think that's a big thing, because I know Indiegogo you get email addresses, but I think Kickstarter they don't give you any email addresses ever.
And I'm not current. I don't know the state of the art. It may be that Indiegogo lets you do that, and I don't know what Kickstarter's policy is anymore.
Well, I think they've seen a little bit of that, but that's a big thing, is the power of community. How have you leveraged that community to like really power your growth going forward?
Well, I'll just give it to you in the context of the crowdfunding campaign. So we sold almost $30 million worth of product in 30 days. And ads, we launched the product with the campaign with zero ad budget. We were not running ads when we launched, and we didn't plan to launch it at all. It was only once we had the first 8 million and we're like halfway through that we said, I bet we could let's see if we could do anything. So we ran literally, I was at one of our investors had a conference, and I was there with my co-founder, and he turned to me and said, I wonder if we're better off listening to this session or ditching the entire conference, holding up in our hotel room and trying to be the biggest crowdfunding campaign of all time. And I was like, yeah, good call. So went to the hotel room, spent 2 days. So we turned on ads with something like a $10,000 budget, ripped through it, and could see that we were spending something like $45 to acquire an average of a $3,000 customer. We're like, yeah, it's pretty good return. And so we jacked it up to 20K, which was the most that Facebook would let us spend. And then we got to spend a lot of time on Facebook trying to get them to let us spend more money. And we just kept basically spending as much as we were allowed to spend. And our customer acquisition cost never crossed $60 the entire campaign until it was over.
This is circa 2016.
It was 2015, and there's two things that were going on. One was it was a good time for it. That is, ads were more efficient, hardware startups were in vogue, crowdfunding was in vogue. The other one was we had the organic multiplier. That first $8 million was from people who were super excited about it, telling each other about it, getting fired up. And so the ads were just retargeting folks who were already organically excited and thinking about it, and then reminding them that the campaign was going to end shortly. So that was like, the ads were really just kind of frosting on the cake of an organic movement. And I don't know that you could have that sort of ROI from ad spend today, but you absolutely can have an organic movement where people care passionately about something and tell their friends. That never goes away.
And so that's always the challenge, because there's a lot of folks and entrepreneurs that just turn direct to ads, right? And spending money, right? But really the key for growth is this organic movement, really inspiring people. So what were the things that you did to kind of get that initially kicked off so that you could get the movement going?
It is like 90% product. It is 90% having something that people want to talk about. And what the thing that people wanted to talk about was we shot a great video, and the video is really important, that showed people something that they did not think was possible. People did not think that there existed a thing in the world, let alone at this price point, that would let you come up with an idea, push a button, and then have it spring into existence minutes later. Something that's beautiful, that's made from leather and wood. Like, if people knew about anything they'd heard about 3D printing, which is all like lumpy plastic slowly. And if people knew anything about 3D printing, it's all about like CAD software and hours and hours and hours of CAD software, or going to Thingiverse and taking somebody's 3D printed elbow scan or miniature or whatever and downloading it and putting it on there. Nothing creative about that, right? Just doing that, taking out, like, it wasn't a great experience. People look at this and are like, what do you mean I can actually make like a beautiful purse, that I can make a shelf, that I can make a spice rack organizer that's totally customized for that? in, for Spice Rack, let's say in an hour at the push of a button, something is beautiful that my spouse is going to be excited about. Like those with a creative bent dream of the project that has that kind of inspirational creativity. And when they see it, they want to tell everybody about it. So there were other things, like nobody had ever created a desktop laser for the home. Nobody had ever created a laser at this price point. It was so many novel things that people had things to be genuinely excited about. And so people would send it saying, I'm getting one, you should too. People would send it saying, look at this thing that existed that's never existed before. It looks right up your alley. And then we had a referral program. So if you sent it to somebody and they got one too, you got $100 off of yours, which we didn't advertise it as if you tell somebody about it, you'll save $100. We advertised it as there's only one way to get a $100 discount off of this, which is if you tell somebody about it, they will get a discount. You, the people who bought this, are the only people who own discounts. There's no other discounts. So if you don't tell your friend will pay too much. So they could go and be like, I just got this thing and it's amazing. I'm so excited for you to have it too. And yeah, I got $100 about it, but I'm like giving you this discount you wouldn't have otherwise. And we really, when we talked about it, we really talked about it as giving someone a discount. P.S. You also get $100 off, not we'll pay you $100 to tell your friend, which immediately feels icky. And
Yeah,
that's just a different vibe.
doesn't work. Well, Dan, it's been so great having you on the show. Maybe I'll leave it to you to give some last piece of advice for entrepreneurs out there trying to get the marketing going, trying to get the products out there and their ideas into the world.
Boy, if I go back to the very start, I said 4 companies, but gosh, there was this DJ business, and gosh, there was actually other companies that just never got off the ground, that like started and tried and banged my head and they never happened. It is you need that thing that resonates, that fills that customer need. Product market fit, everybody hears about it. Don't start pouring your life, don't start pouring your resources into the project, the thing you're working on, until you've figured out like that thing, until you validated that with a customer. And then when you do, make that the core of what you're about. So the board game that teaches programming principles to preschoolers, everything I said and did was about that core idea and about that. Even when it wasn't about the game, it was about how do we as adults who care about this thing bring this into the world together for the kids that we care about. With Glowforge, I eat, sleep, live, breathe the product. I use it all the time. I care about it. I share it. I show people what it can do. And all of our marketing came from that notion of like, here's the superpowers it gives you. Here are the creative superpowers that you bring into the world. So you have to find, there's that old movie, City Slickers, and Billy Crystal goes to Jack Palance and says, I just don't know what meaning my life has. And Jack Palance says, the meaning of life is one thing. And Billy Crystal says, what is it? And he says, that's what you have to figure out. What is the one thing that gives your life meaning? And companies are the same way. They are about one thing. And as a founder, your job is to figure out what that thing is and then to embrace it and bring it into the world.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It was great having you.
It's great to see you, Chris. Total joy. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again.